Comic Book Savant, episode 381. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode, we're going to be doing another creator spotlight. This episode is particularly special to me just because the creator I'm covering, which is going to be Walt Simonson, he's one of my favorite creators of all time. But before I get into the meat of the episode, I want to talk about a few things. If you are not familiar, I'm a part of the Comics Podcast Network, which you can find over at comicspodcast.com. It's just a great resource. If you like this podcast, you want to find more comic book related content, that you can stop over at comicspodcast.com. And it's a one-stop landing page where you can find tons, literally hundreds of different podcasts based on publisher, particular characters, different genres, even different teams. So you have a lot of different things that you can single out on the Comics Podcast Network and find more great comic book related podcasts or other shows as well. So if you have a moment, definitely stop by and do that. It will be well worth the time. And last but not least, I'd like to give out a shout out to the sponsor for this episode, which is InStockTrades.com. Just a really good place if you're looking for any type of collected edition or even special comics edition. You can find over at InStockTrades.com. They have discounts ranging anywhere from 35, 42 up to 50% off. If you place an order $50 or more and you're a U.S.-based customer, you get free shipping. If you happen to be an international customer, you still get all the great savings that I'm speaking of. You just don't get that free shipping, but they do have some of the most competitive international shipping rates around, so you still can set yourself up to save a ton of money on what you could do using some other sites. So definitely, if you have a moment, stop by InStockTrades.com. Let them know you heard about them here on the Comic Book Savant podcast. I greatly appreciate it. Now, with all that out of the way, let's talk about Walt Simonson. And normally when I do these creator spotlights, I either will spotlight a writer or artist. Well, Walt Simonson is very unique in the fact that he's done both, and he's done both simultaneously. You see it sometimes here and there now. A lot of times you'll see a certain artist might transition into a writer. You don't necessarily see writers transition into artists. You see more so comic artists nowadays will transition into a writer. They don't do both. Maybe Tony S. Daniels for a while, a few years back over at DC, did some stuff with some of the different Batman series where he was actually doing both duties, but it's a rarity now, particularly in the 80s, in the heyday of the 80s. You had not only Walt Simonson, you had Howard Chaykin, you had John Byrne. They were, some of the best, not only writers but artists in the game, and they did both, and they did both on multiple books, for historic runs, and they're some of the top creators of all time. It was just something about Walt Simonson's style that just stood out to me specifically. Just his art style is reminiscent of, I think when I look back at Walt Simonson's work, I look at some of the things that attracted me to his work were the same things that attracted me to Jim Lee's artwork, which was similar to my own, is that the line work was always kind of hard, very deliberate lines, not necessarily their styles were loose. Their lines were very deliberate, hard in their line work, but very much hard edges, grizzled, chins, so forth, which was similar to how when I was a kid, I aspired to be a comic book artist or a cartoonist for, really probably till I got to middle school, junior high, and I kind of just would, I used to win a lot of different like local art contests, have, pictures published in the newspaper and stuff. And I thought for the longest time, and I told this story over the years of doing a podcast, I've said it before, I actually won an internship when I was like 11 or 12 years old to work the internship for Marvel for the summer that I ended up turning down, that I regret to this day. I probably would have been working in comic books if I had actually took that internship, but my parents were split. My father lived in Connecticut. I had recently moved to North Carolina. I didn't have a very close relationship with my father. I wasn't too keen on leaving North Carolina after I just got uprooted to leave Connecticut to go back to stay with someone that I could barely hold a conversation with, and then commute back and forth to New York to do this internship, though it was one of my biggest dreams and probably one of the few things in my life I regret never doing to this day. And I don't normally harbor on regrets, but it's the one thing in my life I truly regret. I think everything happens for a reason, but that's one thing, if I had to do over again, I would have done it, because I ended up becoming, before he passed away, I ended up being super close to my father, and I probably would have, if I was around him more, I probably would have been closer to him longer in my life. And then my life probably would have been on a totally different trajectory. Not saying I've had a bad life at all, but it's one of those things. But one of the things that influenced me, and that really got me into comics as a kid, was seeing them, was, Walt Simonson, John Byrne were like two of my favorites. And the funny thing were, they collaborated a lot together. Well, a lot of times Walt did, because John Byrne had a epic Fantastic Four run that he drew some, wrote some, then he wrote some, then Walt did some of the art, then John left, and then Walt came on and he was doing writing and drawing as well. But really things kicked up for Walt really when he had his run on Thor, and that's really his memorable work. His career spans a ton, and it's too long to just cover everything in one episode, so I'm going to highlight most of the stuff that I'm familiar with, some of the stuff I've read that I can speak on personally through his career. So just to list some of his work and his career that I'm familiar with, we have the Avengers Volume 1. He had a brief stint where he did about a 10-issue run. He did issues 291 through 300, then Annual 17. Volume 2 came out when the Heroes Reborn relaunch came, and he did that Volume 2. He did the last 4 issues of the Avengers series, and back in 1997, he worked on Avengers Volume 4, issues 25 through 30, Avengers vs. X-Men back in 2012. He did a mini Havoc and Wolverine miniseries back in 1989 called Meltdown, which was a 4-issue limited series. He also worked on an Eternals maxi series that came out back in 1986. He did the last 3 issues of that series, issues 9 through 12. His Fantastic Four run, he did from 1989 through 1991. He worked on issues 334 through 341. Then he worked on issues 343 through 350. Then he worked on issues 352 to 354. Then this is one of the first things I think I ever saw that Walt Simonson did, was Raiders of the Lost Ark movie adaptation. Was a 3-issue limited series back in 1981. That's, I think, the first time I ever saw his artwork was during this comic movie adaptation series. That was a 3-issue miniseries back in 1981. Even because I had some of these passed down from my family members. This original Star Wars series that Marvel did way back in the 78 through 82. Simonson did issues 49 through 63. Then he did 65 through 66. Now, what really attaches me to Simonson is his run on Thor, his run on X-Factor, which his Thor run was Volume 1 of Thor. 260 through 271. He did annual number 7. Then he did 337 through 355. Then 357 through 382. And that ran from 1977 through 1986. The first in the 260s, that 12 or so issue run was in the late 70s, and then he returned back to the book in the mid 80s and had that run with Beta Ray Bill, those classic stories, a lot of stuff which was pulled, the Ragnarok storyline that was pulled from we saw in Thor Ragnarok was based a lot off of Kirby and Simonson's run on Thor, which is really, those runs really solidified that character. Then we had the Jason Aaron run. We've had so many really good runs of Thor over the years now that it's kind of, but it starts, that's the foundation. If you want to really dig deep into the character, you're going to look at Kirby, you're going to look at Simonson, you can look at JMS's run. Fraction had a nice run, then Aaron has just been crushing it, and he has to be up there. Like if I had to just say 3 runs on Thor, you would have to check out. I would say Kirby, Simonson, Aaron at this point. Then X Factor, he worked on volumes 10 through 11, issues 13 through 15, 17 through 19, issue 21, 23 through 31, 33 through 34, and 36 through 39. And he worked on X Factor from 1986 to 1989. I'm trying to remember. His wife is a collaborator, which is Louise Simonson. She is a historic writer in the comic business, and they would collaborate together a lot of times. And she was the original writer on X Factor, and I want to say that Walt was doing the pencils, and then he helped co-write some of the scripts, and then he took over writing duties and was writing and doing the artwork for the book as well. So again, he did a lot of stuff where certain things, and it was so hard trying to find his because he has so many writing credits to determine which one we're writing and just art. That's why I said this is a creator spotlight that's real different from other ones that I've done, because he's done both. He's done both at the same time. He's done both constantly over the span of his career. Now later on, because he's up in age now, he just primarily does writing now. So a lot of the stuff that you would see like in the in the 2000s is more him as a writer, but still was always exceptional as a writer. He was equal parts talented as writer as well as artist, and that's what I think I love most about him. And it just resonates to this day. He also worked on the Uncanny X-Men and the New Teen Titans one-shot that came out back in 1982. That was a real big thing at the time, and I remember reading that way back when I was in grade school, and that was like a big deal because those were two of the hottest books and comics at that time. And so to have that one-shot, having him worked on, that was like a huge thing. And that was a hot-selling book back then. Next was World of Warcraft. He worked on that from 2008 to 2010. He had went 25 issues. It was a solid series. I just picked it up because his name was on it, and it was like, I briefly played early in its iteration, World of Warcraft. I might have played it for maybe 6 months or something like that, even if that. So I was fascinated because it had so many tropes like in his classic Thor run. So when I heard he was writing this series, I picked it up, and I really thoroughly enjoyed the series till his run ended on the book. Also back in 2000, from 2000 to 2002, he did a 25 issue run over at DC on Orion solo book. He also did one of the stories on Wednesday's Comics was a experimental thing that DC did back in 2009, but he did the big newspaper print, big page, and they had different artists and writers collaborate and do different stories, and he did a Demon Catwoman story in the Wednesday comics when that came out. And also he did a run on Hawkgirl back in 2006 to 2007, from issue 50 to issue 66. So he's had, and like I said, he has credits going way back into the early 70s to, current day, or relatively current day. And like I said, it's just an honor, because like I said, he has so much influence. To see someone that was able to do both and do both, excel at both so well, really just always made him stand out. His stories just captured so much imagination, heart. Beta Ray Bill is to this day one of my all-time favorite characters. And so when Stormbreaker was made in Infinity War, I totally geeked out. I think that was my biggest geek out moment. I literally almost hopped out of the seat when I realized it was Stormbreaker that they were making. And even that little scene from Thor Ragnarok where we saw at the top of the building where they were doing the statue, creating the face or the bust of Hulk, you saw Beta Ray Bill's face on there. I was just like, I hope we see him within hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years in some Marvel movie. In the Marvel MCU, we have Beta Ray Bill pop up on the scene. I would just freaking love it so much. And what they've done with CGI with Thanos and Infinity War, they could totally do Beta Ray Bill's totally CGI and make him a fully realized, believable character. And I would freaking love it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get that. But he has a huge amount of body of work. It's sometimes it's hard trying to, especially with older writers like this, to get their full bodies of work. A lot of times I do a lot of research through Google and Wikipedia, trying to find as much of their history that I can find to recommend different things to you guys for you to go to and try to check out. I'm going to be putting up a page on the website when I do episodes like this and other things that I recommend, that I'll have links to everything. So there'll be affiliate links. So if you click on it and you happen to purchase any of the stuff, I get a small percentage kickback. But if it'll just be a reading list of things you guys want to find that if you don't already own it, I'll have links to it. So if you want to pick it up, you don't have to pick it up. But if you do, again, like whatever you buy, when you click on those affiliate links, I get a small percentage, so it helps supports the show. So, that'll be a thing. But some of the stuff that I talked about, World of Warcraft was a really cool, fun fantasy adventure series. His store run, it was worth checking out. You can get the X Factor, his run on X Factor, not Essentials. They did away with the Essentials. I can't remember what they were replaced with. I'm seeing it in my head. This escaping me right now. Marvel stop doing Essentials, and they do some other. What are they called? I hate when I whiff on something like that. I'm seeing the covers of them, but I can't remember what they call the format now. Because Essentials were big bound editions that were black and white, but they do something now where they're like Essentials, but they're actually colored with higher quality paper. Essentials were made to be cheaper with just black and white on just cheap newsprint type paper. And of course, I can't find the name of it. But you definitely can. I'll have links to it all. Like I said, I'm setting up a page so you guys can reference this stuff if you want to look it up. His Bold of the Brave. I think I left this off the list by accident. Bold of the Brave. It was going on during his Thor Ragnarok run with Beta Ray Bill and all that. He broke off and did Bold of the Brave. A 4-issue miniseries, was really fun. It really fits in nicely with his Thor run, his later Thor run in the 80s. It's a great companion piece to that as well. I don't know if that's been collected in a trade or in one of his collections, his Marvel Visionary collections that they did. I picked up digitally recently. I want to say the one that has the Ragnarok Beta Ray Bill story, which is Thor Visionaries Volume 3, which I did a trade year pick episode years ago on that, which I will try to remember and find a link to it to put it in the episode notes for you guys. So if you want to check that review out, you can do that as well. But again, he's definitely a creator worth checking out. If you're a younger listener and you're not familiar with some older writers, he's definitely worth, especially if you're reading Aaron's Thor or you like Thor Ragnarok, especially. You want to know what source material it came from. The non-Hulk parts, the stuff that happened like on Asgard was very different, but it was very loosely based from Walt Simonson Visionaries Volume 3 for sure. So that's definitely something you would want to pick up if you were a big fan of that movie and want to see some source material. But that's all I have for you guys for this episode. Again, it's just I want to do more of these creator spotlights and just talk about how particular creators had an effect on me. Again, he inspired me art-wise. I was never much of had a desire to write till I got way older, and I tried to get a comic book off the ground, and that was just a disaster because I was working with some people and it kind of went sideways. But always art-wise, he was one of my biggest influences. Like, if I think about it as a kid, who I looked at and tried to style my artwork after as a kid was primarily Walt Simonson and then John Byrne were the two, big guys that influenced me. And at some point I will do a creator spotlight on John Byrne when I get around to it. I'm trying to go through a whole list and kind of sprinkle them through. You guys seem to kind of be digging these creator spotlights, so I want to do more stuff. Like I said, that this gives you a background and a history of some of the guys behind these epic comics and these legendary comics and classic comics that we love to read and look at. So I hope I'm doing well by these great creators by doing this spotlight. So definitely it will be more to come in the months to come. Also, you could also always stop by the website at comicbooksavant.com. To reach me, you'll have links to all the YouTube content as well as the audio podcast. And I don't know. I've been thinking about doing maybe some written pieces on the website, but it's been tough. Just like I said, between creating podcasts and doing content for the YouTube station and channel. Excuse me, I said station, but channel. Trying to build that up because I still feel like it's in the infancy stages. So if you haven't checked that out, stop by youtube.com/comicbooksavant, subscribe, click on the bell for notification. I do a whole separate set of content on the YouTube channel. I have a series going on right now called the Comic Book Collector's Guide. So if you know someone that's new to comics and want like a tutorial from like the beginning throughout, I do that, and it's for anyone. If you're new to comics, if you're looking for different things in collecting, where to buy comics, best places to save money, so forth, I have a whole series going on there on the YouTube channel. I have about 3 or 4 episodes out, and it has its own playlist, and I have more to come with that. It's a really good resource. It's done really well on the YouTube channel so far, and I'm having fun doing that. I've done prototype episodes over the years on the audio podcast of it, and just decided to parlay all that stuff in, do like a series on YouTube on it to be something exclusive to the YouTube channel. I do like most of the television reviews, and I do non-spoiler movie reviews. So that's the kind of content, trade paperback reviews, like one-off trade paperback reviews and stuff I cover on the YouTube channel. So if you ever want to see stuff like that, definitely that's what's a lot of the majority of the content that's over on the YouTube channel. So definitely, if you haven't already, check that out. And also, you can always follow me on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, at Comic Book Savant. And also check out Facebook. We have a Facebook group. All the links to the Facebook group and all the social media stuff is on comicbooksavant.com. So if you ever want to find it, just go to the homepage. It is a navigation bar at the top, and it's links to all the different stuff there, so you can easily find it. And definitely send feedback if you do so on iTunes. You can leave a review. You can just, follow me on social media and just, give me feedback on something you might want me to cover on the show, what you liked, what you didn't like. Or you can hit me up on Facebook. I'm available anywhere. And as soon as I see a message, I respond to it. A lot of you guys that have reached out to me, I appreciate the love. And, I'll have conversations with whoever reaches out to me as well. So I welcome feedback. So, again, that's all I have for you guys this week, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Comic Book Savant. You guys have a good week, and take care.